Welcome everyone to Caixin's year-end review. When the year 2020 started, do you still remember what kept you busy and what occupied your mind? I do. At that time, our newsroom was very busy with many big topics. The US and China just signed the Phase 1 trade deal, and both sides hoped they would slow the decoupling process. And also the US economy was doing so strong, and US President Donald Trump was gearing up for his campaign to get 4 more years in the White House. No one would have guessed how history would quietly change its course and how fast the coronavirus wave would engulf everyone on the planet. In the past year, Caixin brought you our coverage of the virus, of the impact on economy, on society, on people, and much, much more, ranging from the big tech to the small chips, from the elephant in danger to the global efforts combating climate change. So today we want to share with you how our journalists and editors see the extraordinary year. They will connect you from Washington, D.C., from Tokyo, and from Beijing, and I'm here in Singapore. So let me first start with our two of our correspondents in D.C. and Tokyo, Du Zhihang and Chen Lixiong. It's quite late at night in D.C. Zhihang, how are you doing now?
Hi, Lixin. It is indeed a little bit late here in DC. It's about 10 p.m. now. I'm pretty good. I'm in front of the National Monument, and in front of me, I'm standing on the staircase of the Lincoln Memorial, reporting from DC.
Can see that. Tell me, what are the visible changes you see this year, and what do you think is the most profound and invisible change in DC?
I think the largest change looking back into this year is the masks. Because here in this country, there's almost no tradition of wearing a mask. And when the first COVID patient was tested positive in the city, almost no one was wearing a mask. And it took a long time for people to realize how important it is to wear a mask and protect not only yourself, but also people around you. And if you're walking around the city right now, you can see most of the people wearing a mask. But apart from all those changes in behavior, I think the largest invisible change is people's mindset. From the ongoing pandemic to the protests for George Floyd in May and June, and then through all the hurdles before and after the election, all those unprecedented events have taught us that only when we stand strong and trust science and act collectively can we fight against this unprecedented pandemic and unprecedented crisis that has been affecting everybody's life in this world. So hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel is not far away. Back to you, Lixin.
Thank you, Zhihang, and thanks for the warm message. Stay warm and stay safe. Let's turn to Chen Lixiong. Lixiong, you are in Tokyo. Tell us how Tokyo has changed in the last year.
This is Chen Lixiong speaking from Tokyo. This is a residential area not far from Shinjuku city center. I see many commuters walking by here. And speaking of the change taking place in Japan during the pandemic, most noticeably, all the foreign tourists are gone. You don't see any of them on the street these days, although the government made a lot of efforts to attract many tourists from China, Southeast Asia. That's the first change I see here. And also, there are quite a few restaurants, bars in Tokyo. They are quite small in size due to the land scarcity. And people started to avoid going to these restaurants, bars, so they are really, really suffering. Many of them are already closed. And of course, there was the change of the government in Japan. Nobody expected that Prime Minister Abe would resign so quickly this summer. He was becoming the longest serving prime minister of all time. And going further, in terms of invisible changes, I would say people started to realize there's poverty issue in Japan. I talked to many homeless people, contract workers, even prostitutes. I think they are really, really suffering financially. And we see, the suicide rate for single women has been risen by huge number compared with last year. I think that's another news happening here. And also, I also think, people here started to change their old customs, like bringing hanko, personal seals, to offices and the government is now pushing for more digitalization here. I think that's a positive change occurring in Japan. Yeah. So that was it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Li
Back to
Xiong.
you.
Definitely, there is a lot of human suffering, and there's a lot of human courage we see in this process as well. So thank you, Li Xiong from Tokyo, and thank you, Zhihang from DC. And just like Li Xiong said, this year has been one of massive digitalization. And one thing we learned, like you, is to digitalize all the work process. And in other words, Zoom our entire life. So now let's move from the very cozy fireside to our virtual newsroom, and 4 editors will be waiting to Zoom with us there. If we remember when 2020 started, from January, the entire supply chain has been broken down inch by inch. The airport, the airlines stranded, the cinemas, restaurants all shut down, and you have the international traveling that we and our readers do so often in our lives come to a ground. The very foundation of globalization and modernization has been shaken to the core, and no one can escape. So Caixin has brought you coverage on the virus and beyond. We cover very closely China's economy, Asia's growth, and how the world is readapting to this new norm. So we give you, in terms of the Chinese economy, we tell you about the stimulus package, we tell you about the massive SOE effort, and we also tell you about the massive deleveraging effort that is happening in China. We give you the numbers, and we also try to give you the stories and faces behind the numbers and the trends that would define our history. For instance, one of the biggest trends we witness is the migration, perhaps the largest migration in human history, that is moving from the offline to the online space. And a lot of people's life will change fundamentally because of that. And with all these trends in mind, what will stay and what will go away? Let's bring our 4 editors from Caixin's newsroom and let them share with us what they see are most important in 2020 and what are the things we should keep watching in 2021. So welcome, and let me quickly introduce them from top left to right. Mr. Xu Heqian, he's in charge of our international coverage, the editor for the international desk, and Mr. Li Zengxin, who is the director of Caixin Global Intelligence and microeconomic expert, and Yue Yue is our chief correspondent on securities and also an editor on finance, a real finance expert. And last but not least, Yun Xu, who is the chief editor of Caixin.com and also in charge of all Caixin's tech coverage. So welcome. And I'll turn the virtual ground to Heqian first. Share with us what you see most important in 2020 and what you're looking forward to in 2021.
Hello, everyone. It's Heqian from the international desk of Caixin. Our world has never been so divided in modern time as this year, with the fate of people in different parts of the world has never been so intertwined together as 2020. For reviewing this very traumatic year, I think we won't hesitate to nominate COVID-19 pandemic as the most definitive subject of this year. We won't forget the sacrifices of lives, the braveness of doctors, nurses, and all folks of first line responders. And we will all remember the sense of solidarity and mutual helping in the crisis time that has been shown first in China and then in the rest part of the world. By investigating the early phase management of the pandemic in China, Caixin has also contributed our part in preserving the draft of history for this very special year. Secondly, in China, we just experienced the most eye-catching US presidential election in Chinese society ever. After 4 years of fluctuations and inconvenient surprises in Sino-US relations, now we might be able to foresee a more sophisticated, less improvised manners of contending between our two powers. The third issue I would like to address is the final signing of the RCEP. From a short-term perspective, it's of course a silver lining in the pandemic serialization. And for the longer term, I think it might also kick off a new phase for all Asian Pacific economies, now the major source of economic growth in the world, to elevate their interdependencies significantly. For the outlook of 2021, first, I would like to draw the attention back to the COVID-19 and the vaccine distribution. It's not only a decisive factor that will set the tempo of economic recovery. The fairness, efficiency, and affordability of the vaccine distribution will also conclude whether our world will be segregated into a so-called safe zones and non-safe zone again or not. Secondly, in this year, we will also witness the retirement of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has long been deemed as the ballast storm of EU-China relations, and of course, a fortress of defending the challenge of populism in Europe and in Germany. With a gradual fading out from the public sphere, we might have to encounter a Europe with more unexpectedness. Thirdly, we should not forget the negotiation of China-US Phase 2 deal might be launched in the upcoming year. With the Phase 1 deal has been delivered even against the backdrop of COVID-19, and with possible harvest made between China and the EU on their investment agreement. We should not underestimate the determination of China to further pursue its opening up and reform. That's my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Heqian. That's quite comprehensive. And now let's move on to Zengxin. And Zengxin, Heqian laid the ground about the world. And give us your take on China.
Yeah, thanks. My three things for 2020, first, of course, is rescue and recovery. We can say we had a real robust, although a bit unbalanced recovery, thanks to the measures taken to fight the virus and the stimulus. The good thing is China largely avoided flooding the market with credit this time, in a sense that explicit fiscal policies took the center stage. As a result, we haven't seen big asset price bubbles yet. The second thing is imbalance. I have to single out export here, growing very fast. This is, of course, good for the overall growth, but only in the short term, because this is a result of a substitution effect in which China took the place of other countries. And larger imbalances does not help in trade negotiations. And the question is, next year, who will make up the gap if the external demand diminishes? And the third thing is dual circulation. I think the policymakers, they clearly know that this hype in export is unsustainable. So they have to work harder to get rid of the so-called choke points in the internal circulation. I think this is a good strategy, even if external conditions remain good, because the domestic market should not be a supplement or backup, but rather where all things get started. What to watch next year? I think the first is, of course, access strategy or normalization, how to withdraw from the stimulus. If we say this July or August marks the first turning point when policies turn from expansionary to neutral, And then next year, one will become the second turning point from neutral to tightening. I think fiscal policy is clear, still supportive but less proactive. Monetary policy is delicate. We saw macro leverage has been rising very fast. Next year, we have to balance between deleveraging and maintaining a normal credit flow. And then second thing is trade. Like Heqian just said, maybe trade wars, trade truce, or bilateral investment treaty, or new multilateral pacts, all possibilities. Then the last one is demand side reform. The economic meeting just announced to push forward demand side reform for the first time. Not stimulating, not managing, but reforming. We all see that the weak point is still consumption. The only one still negative compared with last year. More worrisome is a trend. In the past 7 years, average consumption has dropped year by year. And the old tricks like subsidizing car purchase or home appliances won't work. Because in the end, you have to boost the ability to spend, not only the willingness to spend. So all comes down to household income or reducing inequality. Reforms should include measures in redistribution, i.e. Taxation, transfer, social security, hukou system, land use reform, and property tax, etc. I think the demand side reform is the most important thing in the 14th five-year plan as it relates to our pursuit to a happy life. Back to you.
Thank you, Zengxin. That's a very comprehensive look back and look forward of Chinese economy. A lot of keywords to remember. And next, I'll turn to Yue. Finance is, a lot of our readers watch very closely how finance is going to evolve in China. Tell us your take.
Thanks for having me. I think the suspension of the world's largest IPO, Ant Group, has gotten the most attention in the capital market in 2020. It may have repercussions for the whole industry, but it's well known that Ant Group and other fintech giants have grown into conglomerates that combine a wide range of financial and non-financial businesses. So there have been concerns of the excessive power of the rising fintechs that can amplify financial risks. So indeed, we need to reflect on the balance between innovation and supervision. And the second is the gold loan fraud. So more than a dozen Chinese financial institutions, mainly trusted companies, loaned 20 billion yuan to a jewelry company with pure gold as a collateral and insurance policies to cover any losses. Unexpectedly, the gold was found to be fake after several years in February 2020. So authorities are still investigating how this happened. It's unclear whether the collateral was faked in the first place or replaced afterwards. Nevertheless, it reveals that some financial institutions lack basic diligence and fiduciary duty. And the third topic, I think, is the crude oil treasure, yuan you bao. Is an oil price futures product that's led to hundreds of retail investors suffering huge losses. The instance exposed the defects in internal departments such as risk control in the bank. It has also heightened concerns about a contradiction of regulation. Although this kind of product belongs to the bank wealth management, no matter how it is packaged, the derivative property of yuan you bao is undeniable. It should be regulated by the CSRC as a future product. So I think they are the three most important topics in 2020 in financial market. Looking ahead, what to expect in 2021? I think the first is China's market reforms and opening up. In the past few years, China has endeavored to attract greater foreign investment by relaxing more financial market access restrictions and continuously introducing improvements to the business and the regulatory environment. The latest regulations have sent a positive signal to foreign entities that China is moving towards a more open financial market. I believe that subsequent regulations will be issued for further liberalization. So it's time for foreign business to reevaluate their strategy in China. And the second, I think, is Chinese companies listed in US. We know the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act has been signed into law recently. The law prohibits securities of a company from being listed on any US exchange if the company fails to comply with the audit regulation for 3 years in a row. Although the law applies to all foreign companies, it is clearly targeted China. So let's wait and see under Joe Biden's administration whether the US listed Chinese companies have any chance to change their lives. And the third, I think, is the bond defaults. So the default wave in China's bond markets over the past months is a challenge to the deep-rooted market belief that SOEs will be eventually bailed out by the government. So investors have traditionally seen bonds issued by the SOEs as less risky. I think they have to change their mind now. So the defaults by the SOEs may just mark the beginning of a crisis. The debt repayment problem seems to be worsening, and some eruptions seem inevitable in 2021. We should keep a wary eye on China's corporate debt. Yeah, I think I've stopped here.
Thank you, Yue. And we trust you'll keep a wary eye on that, and a lot of that will be translated into our coverage of the China's financial market. So now let's turn to Yunshu. Yue has stolen a line from you on the financial IPO, but I'm sure you have more tech stories to share with us.
Yes, it's not about tech. In 2020, COVID-19 caused the collapse of two very famous startups in China. In April, Lucky Cafe, which has become the first coffee branding within 2 years, which is even bigger than Starbucks in China, announced that inflated revenue 4.2 billion yuan, which means half of its revenue in this year is fake. Few months later, in October, one of Chinese largest online apartment retail platform, Danke Apartment, faced over 3.4 billion yuan of unpaid loan from Wayback, which is a Tencent bank, and other landlords and renters. The consequences of this loans is very seriously. Some of those landlords evicted tenants from their apartments. And another thing is important is the United States started with semiconductors to curb the development of Chinese chips in designs, applications, and manufacturings. Huawei, SMIC, and other Chinese chip design and manufacturing companies enter its US technology export ban list. And other several chip manufacturing face its very seriously debt crisis, such as Tsinghua Yulin Group. The third thing is that TikTok. I think most people know that is China's most successful international application, has been banned in India and the United States. Donald Trump forced TikTok to spin out and sell to American companies. That's the three things we write stories during this year. And next year, 2021, actually, we cannot really looking forward news, but there are still three trends we might pay attention to. The first is Chinese authorities will conduct a series of antitrust investigations into internet companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, and Meituan. We know that those internet giants. The second thing is European Union the United States and China are discussing a digital tax on those technology giants. The third thing is the next year, those very popular internet applications and things such like live broadcasting, e-commerce, or we call 社区团购, community group purchasing, will face really strict supervision. That's all I want to share.
Thank you, Yunxu, and thank all of you for producing these wonderful coverages in 2020 and for following all those important trends for us and for our readers in 2021. Out of the whole bunch of keywords and trends and this and that, we noticed that the coronavirus might be the smallest black swan in human history, and the big tech might be the largest gray rhino in the capital market. Together, they're intertwined and shaped our 2020, and the real impact on us, on our lives, on our economy, and on human history might take many, many years before we can fully fathom. So with that, I want to wrap up our little discussion today, but before we let you go, I want to bring back our two correspondents and ask all 6 of you share with us your personal wish for 2021. So let me start with Heqian again. What do you want to see?
Yeah, my hope is that I can reconvene my overseas trip as soon as possible to visit my friends in different parts of the world, including Zhihang and Li Xiong.
All right, so overseas trips. And Zengxin?
Similar to Heqian's, I want to meet all you guys, not on here, but in Tokyo, in DC, in Singapore, or in Beijing, and have a beer together.
So get out of the Zoom space and to grab a real beer. And how about you, Ye?
I think in crisis lies opportunity. When everything is uncertain, anything is possible. So sometimes you need a little crisis to get your adrenaline flowing and help you realize your potential. So let's go for it.
All right, that's a pretty big one. And Yunxu, how about you?
As usual, I wish I could, with my colleagues, finish more cover stories.
Very practical, and we love to hear that and look forward to reading that. And Zhihang, how about you?
I wish the pandemic is gonna be over and everybody can meet physically instead of via the Zoom in the future.
Again, international travel, basically get closer to people you care. And Li Xiong, how about you?
Yeah, I also hope that the pandemic will be over soon and I can visit my foreign friends all over Asia. Yeah.
Thank you all. And that's a very warm message. We all want to have the connect. We connected on the virtual space, we connected through our emails, through Zooms, through all these platforms. But what we really want is to be close to those we care. And with that, we'll end our little year-end review 2020. I hope all of you stay safe and stay warm, and I hope our readers will keep reading Caixin. Special thanks to all readers, to all the participants for our events year-round, and thank you to our partner, Edge Media Tech, also for putting together this wonderful year-end review. So stay safe, you and your family, and take care. Bye. Happy New Year.
大家辛苦，大家辛苦。